am here to introduce our second panel discussion of the day, Art and Self-Discovery, Creating from Your Truth. This panel is made up of Creative Youth Awards review panelists and a CYA awardee alum. The panel discussions at today's event are your chance to hear from CYA review panelists, who are accomplished arts professionals that spend hours reviewing and scoring the submitted work. We have lots of discussion queued up for just this brief half hour, but we hope to take a couple questions at the end. The panelists will also be available for your one-on-one questions down in the audience area after the panel concludes. I will kick off today's talk by introducing our moderator, Kathryn Wade. Kathryn is the Director of Artist Relations at Jessica Silverman Gallery here in San Francisco. She is a curator who has organized incredible exhibitions and publications for the San Jose Museum of Art, the Wadis Institute for Contemporary Arts at CCA, the Contemporary Jewish Museum in San Francisco, as well as for private collections. Welcome, Kathryn, and welcome, panelists.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. And for our wonderful panel, I'm joined on stage by Kota Ezawa, who is a critically acclaimed visual artist, by Calvin Ray Shawler, who is a Creative Youth Award alumnus working in music composition and theater at Oberlin College, and by the award-winning poet Moshe Win. And I want to start our conversation today with just, if you could give brief introductions and just talk about what kind of art you make and how you got started. We can just go down the line. We'll start with you, Kota.
Okay, yeah, so I'm Kota. Nice to see you all. I'm a visual artist. I guess that's a broad category, but like the real core of what I do is I make animations, and I've been doing this for roughly 20 years. I went to art school, but I never studied animation. It's something I taught myself, so that's why they might look a little bit different than what you see on Cartoon Network. And how did I get started? I feel I always believe like when we're born, we're all artists, and then some people, start doing something else down the road, but I guess I was lucky that I never had to look for I had other jobs, but like I kept making art and do it to this day. Is that good?
Thank you, yeah.
My name is Calvin. I do art kind of all over the board. I'm studying music composition at Oberlin and consider my primary practice in theater as a writer, director, actor, music director, composer, intimacy choreographer. I also write poetry and sing and dance and play piano. Across the board, I would say I'm like stylistically really interested in contrast and repetition and when the abstract becomes accessible and emotional. In terms of like content, I'm really interested in art itself and like myth making and how the stories we tell shape and reflect us. And I'm also interested in connection, and that can be between characters, between an artist and an audience, between multiple artists in a collaborative fashion, which is really the magical thing about theater for me is we're grounding ourselves in personal truth, but we're telling stories as a community, which is a really interesting juxtaposition.
Hi everyone, my name's Ma, and I'm a poet, and recently I've been writing creative nonfiction. I teach at USF and Dominican University, and I wanted to share a little story how I got into poetry. I was in 5th grade, and one day, the last day of class actually, my instructor, my teacher, Mrs. Aronson, she wrote a little poem in my notebook, and she acknowledged that I was indeed a poet. And I just want to thank her. I don't know where she is, But I consider her one of my first mentors, and ever since then, I've been writing and teaching, and let's see, and I have a book that just recently came out.
Thank you all. And Ma, I'm glad that you listened to her when she told you that. For our next question, I'm wondering if you can all share a project that felt particularly personal or meaningful for you.
You want me to start again? Okay, I knew this was coming, and it's a little bit hard. It's almost like picking among your kids, and not all my projects turned out great, but they all felt meaningful in a way. Even some were maybe more popular and successful, but yeah, they all feel quite meaningful. I rarely make work about that directly deals with my personal life. I keep like a little bit of veil of privacy around that. But still, all the work I do also feels personal because a lot of time goes into it, a lot of thought goes into it, and it feels always very vulnerable when people love it. It feels like a big reward, and if people dislike it, it hurts. And so, yeah, making art is a personal thing. That said, I have thought like what has felt especially meaningful, and a project comes to mind that I did actually earlier this year at Fort Mason Center for Arts and Culture, just a few miles away from here. It was a collaboration with a filmmaker and writer called Julian Brave Neuskat, and you should all look up his work. He just released a documentary film called Sugarcane. And that was trying to wrap it up, it was a project looking at the Alcatraz Canoe Journey 2019, which was a ceremonial canoe journey around Alcatraz Island, where 16 tribes from all over the West Coast and Hawaii participated. And this canoe journey was commemorating the 50th anniversary of the occupation of Alcatraz. And the occupation of Alcatraz, in Julian's words, is like the most significant civil rights story nobody has ever heard of. So if you haven't heard of it, please look it up.
I recognize that I'm still rather early in my career, so a lot of my reflections on the works that I've written in the past are still sort of developing. But I think something that helps me when I'm trying to be personal in my work, which I think is really valuable, is the lines that we draw and sort of the imaginary boundaries we create for ourselves. And let me see if I can describe this through an example. 2 years ago, I wrote and directed and produced a show called Wait For Me, Goodbye, Look Up, I Love You, and I sort of view this as like the first really personal work that I was able to put out there. And when I was starting to write it, it was going to be just like review style, so it was just a bunch of scenes and songs that didn't have any sort of narrative cohesion. But and I think because they were so short and because I knew they would be sort of swept up in a sea of short scenes, I was less precious with them. I was more willing to say something more vulnerable because I could always cut it and it would destroy the flow. But as I was sort of compiling these pieces, I was realizing how related they all felt and how relevant they felt to me, which is kind of stupid, but it was something that I hadn't really experienced before, where I was like, wow, I'm writing about the things that are actually relevant to me. And it's not autobiographical or anything, but I'm writing a lot about change as I'm heading off to college. And I'm writing a lot about queerness and Christianity and how those are overlapping in my body. And I think the reason I was able to really push through to that new place of self-expression was because I had this structural barrier. I had a piece that was united but wasn't narratively cohesive. that was switching between a lot of perspectives all of the time. So I was able to express myself authentically and then turn the page and sort of hide that. And so as I've grown, I've tried to hold on to finding the ways in which I am distinct from the things that I'm writing so that I can sort of put on that mask and then be as genuine as I can with that.
So I actually think that my book that just recently came out, Percussing the Thinking Jar, is probably my most personal to date. At the beginning of pandemic, many of us, we were at home, confined to our spaces, and I felt that I had this excess energy, and I actually couldn't stop writing. So I kept writing and writing and writing, and then I lost my cat that I had of 19 years, and that was really heartbreaking. And my mother had a stroke within the first year of the pandemic, and she has a monastery, a Buddhist monastery in Joshua Tree. So my husband and I went down after the first stroke, and I had been going down to the monastery for the first 2 years, and I felt that poetry helped me, process like a lot of the loss and grief that I was experiencing, as well as, thinking about the grief and loss of so many others. And so I feel that this book has probably been my most personal to date.
Yeah, thank you. I want to also think about a time when you've pushed yourself creatively, and maybe that's taking a risk, maybe it's exploring a new material, maybe it's via collaboration, and what that taught you. Kota wants to mix up the order here.
Yeah. Okay, I'll keep going. Yeah. To be quite honest, I feel it's like every project I try to put myself in the position of being a beginner again. Even though there are certain things I've learned over the years, I can never just kind of hit the repeat button or the autoplay button. Has always to be some kind of discovery. Otherwise, it's not really worth the effort. That said, sometimes you do take these creative leaps. And one example that I can think of, I was once invited to give a presentation kind of like here for the 80th birthday of Namjoon Paik. Namjoon Paik is the kind of thought of as the inventor of video art, like an incredibly important artist who passed away before his 80th birthday, and then the Smithsonian American Art Museum celebrated his 80th birthday. And they invited me, not because I'm that big of a deal, but because I was his student. And I thought to kind of do him justice, I shouldn't just stand on stage and talk about the time we spent together, but I should do some kind of Fluxus performance event, because that's what he was known for. So I built this cardboard television and had a paper movie that I had drawn just prior to the event, and played it in front of the distinguished audience of the Smithsonian. And it seemed like a really kind of crazy, silly idea, but it went over really well. I think people were really surprised to have this paper TV performance at this panel. And after I was done with the performance, the director of the museum came up to me and asked if I would donate my cardboard TV to the museum, and it's now in the collection of the Smithsonian, so it worked out really well.
Last winter, I was cast in a production of Wolf Play by Ansel Jung, It's a really beautiful, rich, complex, emotionally beautiful story of a 6-year-old Korean boy who is adopted by an American family, and I played the dad in that American family. And before the play begins, my family decides that we cannot take care of the child any longer, and we rehome him with a lesbian couple. And the show is really about him settling into that new home. And acting was not new for me. I had acted in musical comedy after musical comedy throughout middle and high school, to the point where I was kind of like, okay, I'm done with acting. Like, I'm not getting what I want out of this. And I love the theater, but acting is not my place. But my love for this script and my love for the people working on it, I think really changed how I was prioritizing acting in my artistic career and my personal well-being. And you know, practically, it asked me to do a lot of new things. I had to learn how to box for the role. I had to really step up my line memorization game. I had to be a much healthier actor in terms of being able to step in and out of a turbulent character with a lot more care. And I also think I learned a lot more about sort of approaches to, like, quote-unquote political theater, whatever that means, and representations of race on stage. And this show was really unique because Jinu, the little boy, his ethnicity is specified in the script, obviously, but none of the other characters are. And obviously, like, whenever you cast a show in different racial dynamics, it'll change the script. But particularly in this script, since there are so many explicit conversations about race going on, and so the audience's, like, race lens, so to speak, are constantly on. For my character specifically, every other production I've ever stumbled upon of a wolf play casts my character as a white guy. And, you know, frankly, that's because he's the villain. He's homophobic, he's misogynistic, he's racist, he's abusive, and generally we don't want to associate, we want good representation, you know, but my job as an actor was to take this character that felt very far from me and really ground it in my body and in my lived experience, which is all over acting literature. But I think when it was across a racial divide in my brain, it made it that much more visceral for me. And I really had to do a lot of self-reflection and wrestling with myself. And it's kind of hard to describe everything I got out of that in this limited time. But I think it really made me a much more empathetic person and also more confident in myself. And I think oftentimes our representations of people on stage can be polarizing, and you know, hate can be masked as radicalism, but I think really humanity is the most inclusive option, and that was that felt very revelatory to me recently.
I love that, Calvin. I have done a lot of projects and said yes to a lot of things. And so one thing that pops into my mind, in the 90s, there was a book fair that used to happen in San Francisco. And my friend Kathleen and I, the night before, we were talking to each other and we said, oh my gosh, we know so many artists and musicians and writers. Let's start a magazine. And this is a print magazine, by the way. And how hard could it be? So the next day we went to the book fair. We brought a tape recorder, and we just went up to different artists and writers, and we just asked, "Can we interview you?" And I couldn't believe it. Like, almost everyone said yes. So we either set up interviews or did interviews. Anyways, fast forward, people started asking us if we had a business plan, and Kathleen and I, my partner, we were both like, a business plan? You need a business plan? But we kept on working together and collaborating with a lot of people in the Bay Area on this magazine, and we learned a lot from the experience. We also learned what not to do. So if anyone is thinking of starting a magazine, please talk to me afterwards. But I really enjoyed the process and just, having that experience of starting something from the ground up and, having just different events and meeting so many different, people in the Bay Area. It was really enjoyable.
How long did it run for?
Good question. 2004. Yeah, so
That was a good run.
it's okay.
I wanted to hear each of you speak about something that, like how you maintain your creative inspiration. Do you have rituals you return to when you feel at a loss? Do you have, who do you look to? Where do you look to maintain that?
I can also start if you want, okay? I feel like for me, a lot of the reason that I spread myself across so many disciplines is because I get bored of one. And if I'm not able to maintain my inspiration in one field, I'll jump to another. And that also opens so many opportunities to sort of mesh them and bring them into each other. And that's interesting to me. But I think also what I've been thinking about recently, which I think is helpful for me in longevity, is there are certain practices that sort of deplete me. And those are generally where I'm producing from nothing or I'm leading. Like directing takes a lot out of me. But performing and having more collaborative rehearsal processes, that is really inspiring to me. And also just like consuming new art and working with new people and finding new ways to broaden my mind and my heart. And that is how I'll have moments of okay, I'm ready to produce, and then moments of I need to draw back and recuperate.
Making work is kind of a constant thing. It's more like I get grumpy if I don't have the time to do my work. But then I also, some of these animations that I talked about, they're really long-term projects. They take a year or even 2 years. So I feel I need an idea that I'm really excited about that sustains me through this really long period. And chasing these ideas is it's always tricky. And there you kind of develop certain techniques. For example, I live in the East Bay, so I spend quite a bit of time in the car. And if I need an idea, I don't turn on the radio, and I just like to sit in traffic and just wait for things to land on me. But then they always kind of hit you in the moment. I always keep a notebook near my bed, so sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, then I think I have this idea, run to my notebook and write it down. So chasing inspiration is a constant thing. And if you don't land on an idea that excites you, it can be kind of tormenting and frustrating. But then when you get the idea, it's like double birthday, double espresso. It's really... exciting, and yeah. And weirdly, we were introduced, or I was introduced as a professional artist. It never feels really professional. I feel it was kind of the same thing when I was a teenager. It was the same thing when I was a college student. It just, my body changes, but this chasing inspiration is kind of always the same deal. But but I also wanted to say the thing that the big reward of being an artist, I feel, is you meet really incredibly interesting people, and that maybe starts in high school when you go to your advanced painting class, and then continues when you go off to college and meet some people that are maybe like-minded, and it just kind of goes on, and including today, we just met. It's exciting, and it's the big reward.
I think I mentioned that I love to collaborate. I would say that collaboration has really been a big part of my practice. 3 times a week, I meet with different writers on Zoom, and we talk about process, and we might write together, share work, and then I'm in 3 writing groups, which meet every month. So I like the accountability of working with groups and working with writing partners. I feel that I like writing in person together. I really like small to large scale collaborations with writers and artists of all different genres. And I think that one of the things that I learned from collaborations is the process of doing collaborations is that you can create your own work and someone else can do their work, and but you can create something very special and different and unique when you work together. And I love actually the surprises that can happen with collaboration, and I also like the challenges of it as well.
Well, thank you. I'm wondering, do we have time for...
Hold on, I think we have time. Oh, there we go. I think we have time for a question or two from the audience. If somebody wants to raise their hand, I'll bring the mic.
Thanks. Hi. What are your thoughts on trends and kind of how does that maybe inspire you, or maybe do you ignore it? Do you like to take a trend and see it as like a structure to something that you can paint yourself on? And yeah, just curious how you guys think about that.
Did you guys hear that question? I'll just repeat the question. It's, what are your thoughts on trends?
I feel like I'm still definitely discovering my own artistic voice. So I'm really like a collector right now. So if there are things that are exciting to me, movements that move me, so to speak, and that can be historical or present, I'll add it to my tin and I'll play around with it, and maybe it'll work its way into my vocabulary, and probably it will in some small part, or I'll be like, I'm not really connecting with this, yada, yada, yada. But I think, show me and I'll see what I want to do with it,
Yeah, I have to say, like Calvin, I'm not so focused on trends, but if a trend in writing poetry comes up, I'll be interested in perhaps checking out the poet, because I teach and I'm always interested in what's out there, what's being written. I guess sometimes you can't help but being influenced somehow by what's around you. But yeah, I wouldn't consider myself a trendy writer or a trendy poet.
Yeah, I feel the art world kind of goes through these trends. There's times where abstraction is favored over figurative art, or there's times where it's the opposite. And I feel it's healthiest to ignore these trends. That said, is also in the contemporary art world, there's kind of this weird, task put upon artists to do something that's new or contemporary. And so I feel also as an artist, you want to learn about the time you're living in and kind of dive into the time you're living in. And I feel very lucky. I have kids, so they teach me about the time I live in, and I'm also a college student, so I'm really, I feel I learn from my students as much as they learn from me, or I learn more from them than they learn from me. I'm so curious what they're watching, what they're listening to, how they, what they're thinking. And this is kind of an ongoing thing, trying to learn about the time that we live in, and not just by scanning news media, but by talking to people and meeting people of all ages.
Thank you. Can we have a big round of applause for our panel? Thank you all just for opening up and for your vulnerability and telling us about your journeys and your present practices.